My name is Louise Jones, and despite the sadness of the day, it is my privilege to be here with you and offer you all a very warm welcome as we unite in both love and friendship, not just to say goodbye, but to honour and celebrate the life of Steve Truglia, a truly inspirational man who has been lost to us all. As with any memorial service, we gather here to mourn a departed loved one and friend, to try to come to terms with how different our lives will be now without him. We have gathered here not only to consider the shortness and uncertainty of life on earth, but to give thanks for the gift of life, the gift of family, and the gift of friendship. We are not just here to grieve his loss, but also to give thanks, to pay tribute to his achievements, and of course, to support and comfort each other. I ask that you feel free to be at one with your sorrow, your sadness, and your memories. But also I ask that you feel free to feel the gladness, the happiness, and the purpose of a life so well lived. Our collective sorrow and grief becomes a collective strength, enabling us to find closure and move on without the physical presence of our dear Steve. This time we spend together today is to remember Steve and allow our sorrow and sadness to surface and be expressed with words, in tears, and in reflection. Let us remember Steve's life with gratitude, joy, gladness, and love. I would like to invite up Sergeant Major Ian Corr, who was inspirational to Steve during his service in the 289 Battery 29 Commando Regiment Royal Artillery. Have I said that right? Ian has kindly offered to read us this next passage.
I'll stand here because I'm a hobbit and you wouldn't see me behind there. Just a quick little story. Steve wanted to go training in Wales and we were going across anyway, and I took my two daughters. I didn't take them for the trip, they were going to do the cooking for all the soldiers. But Steve said, I want to go with you because I want to do my own training. He said, I'm not going to do what the batteries do, I've got to get up them hills, get the pack on and get going, all the rest. It's one of those stories, you have to be there, but it was just one of those things. So anyway, the boys all go and do whatever they're doing, we've made breakfast, and we go out in the truck. Steve's there, he's all dressed up, he's got this great burger on, he's got, we'll do about 20 hours running, going to do this, that, whatever. I said, right, okay, Steve, where you go? Where shall we meet you? I said, I'll be back tomorrow morning, I'll do my own thing, off you go. I said, right, off you go then, matey. So he whizzes off, he's like this gazelle, he's gone. He's gone. And me and my daughters are walking there, bimbling along, because we're not got to do anything till lunchtime. Bimbling along, and we're looking at him, and he's herring up this hill, whizzing up, he's like a goat. And he's whizzing up, all of a sudden, he slips, stumbles, rolls down, well, we're just like, what is going on here? And my daughters go, oh, look, Dad, he's got banana shoes on. I said, what's that? Slippers. Anyway, that was, you had to be there. Right, so, serious now. So Phil phoned me up the other day and said, would you be so kind as to read out a poem? And I said, Phil, of course I will. So, how long is a man's life, finally? Is it 1,000 days or only one? 1 week or a few centuries? How long does a man's death last? And what do we mean when we say gone forever? Adrift in such preoccupations, we seek clarification. We can go to the philosophers, but they will grow tired of our questions. We can go to the priests and the rabbis, but they may be too busy with administration. So how long does a man live, finally? And how much does he live whilst he lives? We fret and ask many questions. Then when it comes to us, the answer is so simple. A man lives for as long as we carry him inside us, for as long as we carry the harvest of his dreams, for as long as we ourselves live. Holding memories in common, a man lives. His lover will carry his scent, his touch and remember his smile. A friend will carry his arguments or share his fears and concerns. Another will still laugh at his jokes and recall his favourite tunes. And the days will pass with baffled faces and disbelief. Then the weeks, then the months. Then there will be a day when no question is asked, and the knots of grief will loosen in the stomach, and the drained, sad faces will calm. And on that day, he will have not ceased, but will have ceased to be separated by death. How long does a man live? Finally, a man lives so many different lengths of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve did a very dangerous job, but we all know that. He spent week in, week out, risking life and limb. He used to make me really laugh when I used to see him at my gigs, hobbling in with different broken limbs from one gig to the next. But when I was told the news that he had died doing his job, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. It took so long to sink in, and I began to question myself. Why was I so shocked? Steve did a dangerous job. I think it's because I feel like in life there should be this unwritten rule that if you live your life full out, if you're someone who makes every second of every day count, when so many of us waste our time away procrastinating over menial tasks or never changing the things we're really unhappy with, I feel like you should be given longevity in life. So I was left feeling like he was robbed. I was left feeling like we were robbed. Although anyone dying is of course sad, I still feel like, with Steve, it's unfair. There is a saying, we all die, but not all of us truly live. Steve truly lived. The last time I saw him, he was training to do a jump to Earth from space. Something completely bonkers for someone with a teeny tiny mind like mine. But for Steve, this was just another day in the office. I saw him the last time briefly at the gym. I was doing a workout with a mutual friend, Brian, and he walked in and told us he couldn't stop to chat because he was only here for 20 minutes. He was so busy that his gym workouts, which he was obsessed about, were only 20 minutes at a time. I don't know anyone else who could be bothered when they only have 20 minutes to themselves in a day to think, oh, I can fit a work in that time. That was Steve's success, his mindset. He was wired differently to most people. He was so driven to learn and to experience all that life could offer you. You couldn't help but find him fascinating, interesting, inspiring, and you couldn't help but to hold him with the utmost respect because he was also very humble, down to earth, and would be just as interested to hear about what you were up to in life. I believe he simply loved life. He confessed in an interview once that he'd never been able to keep still. What Steve has completed is nothing less than outstanding. He has done 2,000 parachute jumps, he's run marathons, completed triathlons, climbed mountains and rocks, studied martial arts, swam, boxed, canoed, and was one of Britain's best free divers, able to hold his breath for astonishing 6 minutes. In an exhausting list of achievements that he pursued almost relentlessly, he held the world record for the fastest abseil in 2004 and for a full body burn stunt that involved holding his breath for almost 3 minutes in 800-degree heat. He then set himself the goal of breaking the parachute record by leaping from the edge of space, hoping to reach speeds of 700 miles per hour in the first 11 to 15 seconds before free-falling for more than 7 minutes. He gave himself a 98% chance of survival. There were so many aspects to Steve's life, so many things I haven't covered, But there are many people here today who wish to pay their own tribute to him. So I'm going to stop here and hand over to Brian Spence, who has his own tribute to this truly amazing individual. Thank you, Brian.
Right, thanks, Louise. There are so many facets to Steve. I've been allocated to talk about Steve, the musician. If you look at the top shelf of my bookcase, you'll see countless self-help books. Most I haven't read. One by Paul McKenna is called Change Your Life in 7 Days. Change your life in 7 days. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's impossible. Unless you're Steve Truglia. He wasn't particularly talented. He wasn't the biggest, fastest or strongest. He wasn't blessed with a great musical ear where singing is natural as talking, like some people in the room. And yet his own self-belief drove him to learn guitar, piano and saxophone. On top of that, to sing and perform in his own one-man show at an age when many musicians would have given up. Steve was always in a hurry to reach his goals, but the diversity of them are staggering. When he told me he was going to do a Buddy Holly tribute, I thought, that's not going to happen. You can't sing, you can't play guitar, and you look nothing like Buddy Holly. 8 weeks later, he said, "Are you coming to my gig? I've got a Buddy Holly tribute show at a social club in Stratford." Now, a few weeks before, Steve and Phil, though great mates, had one of their lovers' tiffs and weren't talking. So he added, "But whatever you do, don't tell Phil. He'll take the piss and he'll put me off." On the big night, a few of us went down to the gig. We were terrified for Steve, and while we were waiting, this old man with a walking stick shuffled up towards us. He was wearing a flat cap, a scruffy old overcoat, and National Health glasses. "Phil," I said, "you're not supposed to be here." Anyway, someone grasped on Phil, and he was thrown out the club. So Steve goes on stage. He's got posters, flashing lights, a backdrop, he's got the moves, he plays guitar and he sings. And we were stunned because the crowd, they're loving it. So much so, they're queuing for autographs at the end of the show. Now we all know, especially musicians here, that rarely happens even after years of playing, never mind after one 40-minute set. By the way, Phil did see Steve's show. He bluffed his way in 15 minutes later, dressed as a canteen lady. All that SAS training wasn't wasted. One day Steve decided he would incorporate saxophone in his set, so he had a sax lesson. When he met the teacher, Steve took the sax out of his case and he said, "I want to learn the saxophone riff for Baker Street, as I have a gig in 6 weeks' time." "Hold on a minute," said the teacher. "It'll take 2 years before we can even start on that. You have to learn all the scales and it takes years to develop a proper technique." Steve calmly laid down the sax, took it apart, put it back in its case and said, "Then you're the wrong teacher for me." He found another teacher. He practiced 14 hours a day. 6 weeks later, he was on stage playing Baker Street perfectly. There are many ways to change a light bulb. How I would do it, how you would do it. But if I wanted to do it the fastest and most efficient way, I'd ask myself, how would Steve do it? But maybe that's because I'm a fan. And it'll be a long time, if ever, that we'll find an inspiration like Steve again. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Is Danielle here? Is she not here?
Oh, no, Daniel's not here.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah.
I've been asked to read this on Daniel's behalf. Okay. Uncle Stephen, your achievements were endless, and you were such an inspiration to many. A true hero, my hero. My heart feels heavy and sore. Time may pass and fade away, but Uncle Stephen, you will always remain alive in my heart forever. I love you and I miss you. Rest in peace. With love always. From Danielle and Sebastian, niece and nephew, and Blommy, Danielle's fiance. I'd like to call up Adrian Holman from the Canoe Club. Come.
Right, okay, I'll give this a try. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Adrian and I chair Barking and Dagenham Canoe Club, of which Steve was a member. We were incredibly fortunate to have Steve as a member, and I'm sure there are others better placed to speak on canoeing's behalf, but I'm very proud and extremely proud to have the opportunity. Steve was such an outgoing and popular person. He trained and competed at clubs all over the region. He made many friends on his travels, and particularly at Bishop Stortford Canoe Club, but there are also people from other clubs, including Chelmsford, who have made the journey today to pay respects and to say goodbye to him. When Steve started paddling with us, I soon realised what a determined and hard-working person he was. In what I slowly learned, I think, what was typical of him, he immersed himself totally in the sport. Frankly, he immersed himself in almost every river he paddled on as well. His talents are many, clearly many and varied, but to see him combine free diver, swimmer and canoeist in one swift mood was often brilliant. He always surfaced though with a big grin and always more determined than he had been when he fell in. A race in Huntingdon, in the early days of him coming back to kayaking, I saw him repeat this about 3 or 4 times. Each time he got out very fast, he disappeared underwater and he surfaced. And then he emptied the boat out and got back in. I think it was about the 4th time. Then the starter said go, and off he went. Wobbling away, off into the distance, and I heard he did it another couple of times along the course as well. He still, however, managed to come 13th out of 23. How? I've no idea. This, though, was typical of Steve, approaching the task in front with hard work, courage, determination and focus. He was admired by everyone he came into contact with. Travelling around with his very distinctive red and white kayak, he paddled at every opportunity, resolutely determined to master the skills required to stay in a wobbly boat. Each week, each month, you could see the improvements. He fell out less, he trained harder. The example he set to us all, but particularly the younger paddlers, was amazing, and he would never fail to stop and encourage and cajole them into training harder. Steve was a multi-time finisher of the Devizes to Westminster canoe race. He did it 3 times in the 1980s, twice with Phil, sitting here, who gave him his fastest finish of 20 hours and 47 minutes, and once with I.J. Donaldson. He then put all his recent single boat training to good effect, completing the event in 2016. Unfortunately, this event cut short at Teddington due to poor weather conditions, and I am told that the look of disappointment on his face when he received the news wasn't there. I expected no less of him when he said he was going to do Devizes to Westminster again this year. He was already in training when I received his last message. He asked me to enter him in a longer race than our own club event held on the same day, as he was building up his mileage in November, ready for Easter. I'm not going to try and add to the list of qualities Steve Truglia had. We'll all have our own individual memories and recollections. I will, however, say that this amazing man brought an awful lot to the world and will be long remembered and sorely missed. Steve Truglia, I and many others owe you a debt of gratitude that will be hard to repay. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Okay, next tribute is by Phil.
What was that?
Get the vodka.
Yeah, it is vodka, yeah. I've really agonised over what I should say here and how best to sum up and condense the life of my best and closest friend, Stephen Mario Pellegrino Truglia. I bet most of you didn't know that. To be fair, he didn't advertise it. To most of us, he was just Steve, a man who went far beyond what Rudyard Kipling suggested in his wonderful poem If, when he said, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. That's something Steve excelled at. He truly did fill those unforgiving minutes of his own life until they were bursting at the seams. So I've had to viciously edit and condense what I really wanted to say, and I've managed to get it down to just under 4 hours. So if you're sitting comfortably, I'll begin. I'm kidding, it's only an hour and a half. I met Steve on a bleak Welsh hillside in 1981 at the tail end of our SAS selection course. The grid reference, lads, if you get your maps out, it's sheet 160 of the Brecon Beacons, I'm sure you remember it. Well, I was heading towards one of the final RVs or checkpoints, and I heard someone behind me. I turned around, and there was Steve. We stopped briefly and shared some fruitcake his mum Rosa had made, and after a quick drink of water, we headed off. And that meeting, 36 years ago, was the beginning of our friendship. We ended up serving in the same troop, and as both our surnames began with the same letter, we always seemed to end up on the same military courses, as they were often booked in alphabetical order. One course that stands out in particular was our basic military parachute course. We drove through RAF Bryce Norton in November 1982 in Steve's 4.2 litre XJ6 Jaguar. Sounds good, it wasn't. It was an awful mauve-coloured rusting heap of shit with completely bald tyres. And Steve drove this death trap like a brash, overconfident, arrogant, macho Italian teenager, because back then, that's exactly what he was. We drove through a torrential monsoon-like downpour at over 90 miles an hour, and the car began to slide. I said, Steve, we're aquaplaning. He just smiled, looked at me and said, what's aquaplaning? I've no idea how we got there alive, but after that white-knuckle journey, the parachute was an absolute breeze, and we both gained our wings. Steve, of course, went one better and won the Best Student Award, despite deploying his reserve on the final jump while still inside the aircraft. Steve's driving skills, or lack of them, during his early military service was very evident, and many of us were reluctant to get into a vehicle if Steve was behind the wheel. I've seen a Land Rover on its side, another smashed into a tree, and a 4-ton truck with its axle completely ripped off. You can guess who the culprit was. It makes you wonder then how a few years later he became one of the biggest stunt drivers in the world, with credits on some of the biggest movies ever made. He held the record for driving a car around the world's biggest loop-the-loop and was the resident stunt driver on TV's Fifth Gear. Some say he may have appeared on Top Gear wearing a distinctive white racing suit and full-face helmet. And as Jeremy Clarkson would say, all we know is he's called the Stig, but I'm not supposed to mention that. For those that served with Steve in the early 1980s, that ought to read, all we know is he's called the Spick. And he was. After 6 years in 21 SAS, Steve followed me into 29 Commando Regiment, Royal Artillery. And after passing the All Arms Commando course, we served in 289 Battery, firing the 105mm light gun. Our main role was in support of 3 Commando Brigade, protecting the northern flank of Europe. This meant serving in the Arctic, and we both completed basic and advanced Arctic warfare training. After that, I'm not too sure what Steve actually did in the battery, but he always seemed to wangle the best overseas trips. One of which was a 6-week exchange trip with the 2nd Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company of the United States Marine Corps, or 2ANGLICO for short. Whilst there, he successfully qualified as an advanced military parachutist, earning these coveted United States Marine Corps gold parachute wings. And these are actually Steve's wings, which I'm wearing in his honour today. Steve's military service didn't end there. After 6 years in 29 Commando, he cross-decked and joined the Royal Marine Reserve, where he qualified as a swimmer canoeist in the SBS, rejoining UK Special Forces for a further 6 years. More recently, he spent 2 years as an instructor in the Royal Marine Cadet Force. In total, Steve served Queen and Country for over 20 years. Personally, I think he just liked dressing up in a uniform. Many of the skills Steve acquired in the military gave him a head start when he decided to become a professional stuntman. He qualified in 1996 and was listed on the world-renowned British Equity Stunt Register, becoming one of the top stunt coordinators in the country. But this was just the beginning of even more adventures, any one of which might have been a lifetime achievement for someone. But no sooner had he finished one, he'd already be working on another. And once Steve decided to do something, he was unstoppable. He had a laser beam-like focus and nothing would deter him. Let me give you a real-life example. Late one night, Steve watched a film about freediving called The Big Blue. If ever a sport was insane, then freediving ticks all the boxes. But it gets worse. The most extreme discipline is called no limits freediving. How it works is very simple. You grab hold of a very heavy lead weight attached to a wire that disappears deep below the surface. You then take one breath of air and release the brake. The weight then hurtles straight down, dragging you with it into the black, murky depths of the ocean. The incredible pressure crushes your lungs until they fill with blood, and it feels like you're drowning. I'm told they actually get to enjoy this sensation. Once you reach an agreed depth, you take a look around, wave to a fish or two, and then return to the surface. 1 week after watching this film, Steve is in the south of France on a training course with the world champion No Limits freediver. On returning to London, he announces to the established freediving community that he's going to set a new British record. They say, fine, it's going to take you about 2 years training. Steve says, no, I want to do it within 6 months. They all said, you're mad, it's just not possible. Steve, as we've heard already, learned to hold his breath for 6 minutes. And just 5 months after watching that movie, with just one breath of air, he established a British No Limits freedive record of 76 metres, or close to 250 feet below the surface. A few years ago, Steve began yet another adventure in the world of magic, a subject that's always fascinated him. But like most, he could only manage at best 1 or 2 basic card tricks. So typical of Steve, he sought to learn from the best magicians in the world. For over a year and a half, Steve never had a pack of cards out of his hands because he was learning the most complex and difficult sleight of hand card tricks. He incorporated these into a show he was writing on the history of gambling and cheating through the ages. For credibility, he passed the notoriously difficult audition process and became a member of the Magic Circle, the world's most prestigious magic society. The Card Shark show, which he wrote, performed and produced, opened to rave reviews in November 2012 and has since become the longest-running magic show in the West End of London. 1 year after the show opened, Steve was awarded the highest degree attainable, an associate of the Inner Magic Circle. To put that into perspective, he's one of only 300 people in the world to hold that distinction. People often commented on how talented Steve was, but his reply was always the same. It's not talent, it's dedication, focus, and hard work. Steve's final passion in life was a sport that we were introduced to in 2-1 SAS in December 1983, when we began training for the 125-mile Devizes to Westminster canoe race. The DW is the longest and toughest non-stop canoe race in the world. Steve and I completed it in 84 and 85, placing first in the team prize for fastest military crew. 30 years later, Steve returned to this sport in the K1 single kayak class, paddling a staggering 1,000 miles in training before completing in last year's race. Excuse me, a quick drink. Prior to his death, Steve was on target for a sub-20-hour race, time in this year's race. Steve took to the sport like a duck to water, and for him it was the closest he ever came to finding the camaraderie and esprit de corps that he'd enjoyed for so many years in the military. To say he loved the sport and the people involved would be an understatement. Had it not been for a completely iced-up course, the officially sanctioned inaugural Steve Truglia Memorial Canoe Race would have taken place last week. It's now rescheduled for the 14th of May. Shortly after Steve died, I did an interview with a newspaper, and at the end I was asked to sum up if there was a sentence or a phrase that I could think of that would sum Steve up. I paused for a moment before saying that's probably the most difficult question I've ever been asked. How can I sum up the life of my best friend, someone I've known for 36 years, who was such a remarkable man, in one sentence? I said, it's impossible. And the reporter said, you just did. After that one, I came across a one-line quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, which I'm going to leave you with, and which I think sums up the general ethos of who Steve was. Go not where the path may lead, but instead go where there is no path and leave a trail. One final thing, and this is a top tip. If you ever abseil, remember to stop before you reach the ground. Steve, I miss you, mate, and if we do meet again, I hope it's not anytime soon. Goodbye.
Thanks, Phil. I've been asked to read this next tribute by Ellen Hanley, who is staying with Steve's mum, Rosa's side today. She's here now, though. So I'm reading this on your behalf. There are many ways to try to define the Steve we knew, but to talk of his relationship with his mum, Rosa, may in some way describe the somewhat hidden and softer side of him and remind us of the private man he was away from the spotlight. Steve often talked of his mother's support, particularly her love and patience during his teenage years, as he struggled with the mundane routine of school life and the restrictions placed on him within the adult working world, neither of which challenged him and caused frustration to his lively head. Rosa never lost patience or faith in her son and installed him in self-esteem and confidence and a let's do this attitude. Steve felt that her unconditional love and support enabled him to discover his potential and live a life of immense achievement and amazing experiences. Picasso said of his own mother, "When I was a child, my mother said to me, if you become a soldier, you'll be a general. If you become a monk, you'll end up as the Pope. Instead, I became a painter and wound up as Picasso." And this pretty much describes Rosa's positive impact on Steve. When Steve was called upon to return that unconditional love and devote his midlife to his mother's needs, he did so without hesitation. This role was without a doubt Steve's biggest achievement, requiring his standard mindset of 100% determination. Whilst truly heartbroken at his mum's decline, he became an Alzheimer's and care management expert. Steve managed the near impossible and kept Rosa not just safe, but well and very happy at home with all of her wonderful personality, sense of humour and loving nature intact. Something rarely achieved, let alone pretty much single-handedly. True to style, Steve kept all the balls in the air against all odds and continued to challenge himself and learn and share new skills. This quote by Helen Ramos defines Steve, the son, very well. "A good son will never allow sorrow to befall his mother and act as if he is an only child that cares, protects when no one dares, serves with his life in return." He was loyal, caring, kind, generous, hard-working, exceptionally talented, a teacher, a mentor, a confidant, and a bundle of positive energy, which could be positively annoying and unswerved by the opinion of others. He cared deeply for any vulnerable being. He farted with too much glee and was so very bloody funny. He was stubborn, an expert non-parent of some of our children. And Steve was also a dog thief, which I'm dying to know more about that. He had standards, and if you met those standards, he cared for you deeply and stood firm beside you. He, however, rarely asked for help, even with his mum. That said, there were his quests for new skills and his assumption that this was equally pleasurable to others, i.e. standing in cold water for long periods of time, ensuring that he didn't pass out and drown when practicing breath holding for free diving training. You'll be amused to know this training began on a therapy plinth with Steve's head in a bucket of water and a phone for emergency use within reach. We are both blessed to have been his friends, and some of us honoured to also know his equally amazing mum. Our gathering today is a testament to the man we knew and loved and missed deeply, and also to the woman that raised him. When you think of Steve, please think also of Rosa, who is still with us. We have them both in our hearts and strive to do our duty by his mum, as was his only wish should he not be here for her. Ellen, aka Creech. Memories build a special kind of bridge when we have to part with our loved ones. They help us to feel that we are with them still and help us to soothe our pain and grief. Our memories span the years we shared, preserving ties of love and friendship, and can bring us peace of mind. You will each have your own special memories of Steve, Let us sit now in quiet reflection while we listen to Corporal Jake Pugsley of the 2nd Battalion Rifles play this next piece of music for us, while we remember all the times spent with Steve and what made him so very special to you. Would you all please stand? Please be seated. Steve, what joy and inspiration you brought into our lives. We are saddened by the knowledge that we will never hear your voice or laugh again. But how privileged we have been to have known you for so long. Our future will be emptier for your absence, but our memories are overflowing because of you. Thank you for all that you are, for all that you've left us, and for all that you mean to us. We now leave the memory of our dear friend Steve in peace. With enduring love and respect, we bid him farewell. May you find richness and example in your memories of Steve. May you find strength and support in your love for one another, and may you find peace in your hearts. And let us promise him to have a devotion to things worthwhile and make our living of real and meaningful worth. We are truly blessed that we saw his face, felt the touch of his hand. We are blessed with his memories, with his words, his deeds, and his character. Steve Truglia, we will think of you daily, speak of you often, cherish you always, and carry you in our hearts forever. I'd like to invite Gary Hilson to come and sing for us our final tribute to Steve. And do someone's hair for them on the way up. Thank you. We finish, yeah.
I don't know where the verb is on that. Have a look. I've been invited to sing one of Steve's favourite songs that he used to come to my karaoke and sing. I'll just say a few words about my experiences with Steve. I first met him when Phil was dressed up as an old man in Stratford. I knew Phil first, and I was invited to gate crash this Buddy Holly tribute, and it was fantastic. It was brilliant. I built a friendship with Steve from that day onwards, and I hope that I went part of the way to heal the lovers' tiff, because I was talking to Phil and Steve, and I'm glad that happened. We had our own little lovers' tiff a few years ago, me and Steve, and we never spoke. And I had a chance to mend that about 6 months ago, when me and Phil was at one of Debbie and Brian's gigs, and Steve come down and never had a cross word. He never mentioned it. We just, like a true gentleman, come in, shook my hand, and talked as if nothing had happened. And Steve was also the godfather to my children. They never knew him that well. Steve put Mr. T on the phone. He was working with Mr. T, and my kids got to speak to Mr. T through Steve, and that's how they remember him. And the only sad thing is that the inspiration that he could have brought to their life has been cut short now. They'll never know him, but I'm sure out of Steve's passing that we can all achieve them things that we want to achieve in life. We've all got things that we want to do in life and we procrastinate on them. I've procrastinated for 15 years doing my Neil Diamond tribute. And he's done eight tribute shows in that time. So I'm going to sing one of Dean Martin's songs in a minute, and Steve actually detested Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra. And I got him on to listening to Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, and like Brian said, within a few weeks he was doing a Dean Martin and Rat Pack tribute. And that was Steve all over. If he set his mind to do something, he'd done it. And I think we can all, a bit of Steve can live on in all of us by getting done the things that we want to get done in life. Stop procrastinating. If there's one thing you want to do in life, take a little bit from Steve and get it done. And I'll miss him. That's too much. That's about it.
Very sensitive.
It is. It's very sensitive, Lou. We're not sure about this system because this is the club system, so we'll do our best, but I'm going to sing That's Amore. I'm sure everyone knows the words to it. I don't, because I've got them on screen down here. But if you can all sing along with me, I'd appreciate it. Pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore. Bells will ring, ting-a-ling-a-ling, ting-a-ling-a-ling, and you'll sing Vita Bella. Hearts will play tippy-tippy-tay, tippy-tippy-tay, like a guitarella. When the stars make you drool, just like pasta fazool, that's amore. When you dance down the street with a cloud at your feet, you're in love. When you walk in a dream, but you know you're not dreaming, signore. Scusa me, but you'll see back in North Napoli, that's amore. Here we go, guys, come on. When the moon hits your eye like a big piece of pie, that's amore. Too much wine, that's amore. Bells will ring, ting-a-ling-a-ling, ting-a-ling-a-ling, and you'll sing Vita Bella. Hearts will play tippy-tippy-tay, tippy-tippy-tay, like a guitarella. When the stars make you drool, just like pasta fazool, that's amore. When you dance down the street with a cloud at your feet, you're in love. When you walk in a dream, but you know you're not dreaming, signore.
you'll see back in old Napoli, that's amore. That's amore. Thank you.
Hello, most of you know that I'm Phil's sister. It's been a very difficult day today for many of us. I think there's one person responsible for what's happened this afternoon to bring all of you together in such difficult circumstances, and I really don't know how he's managed to pull it off, but he has. It's been fantastic, and I think if Steve had had his choice, I think he would have much preferred to be here than in that goddamn church. So just put your hands together for Phil, and please be aware it's going to be the months and years that carry on now without Steve. Be there for him, give him a ring, come and have a drink with him, because it's going to be very, very tough. He's lost his closest buddy, and I don't know how he will carry on without him, but he'll have to, and I hope he'll have your support and friendship. Thank you all for coming, it's been really great.
Really right.
Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, please stay around and thank you. And have a drink with us this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bars open downstairs.
Do you want to keep that?